I hope you found that exercise informative, and now we're just going to watch a little video clip before moving on to looking at the health and safety effects of some of the other drugs. The second depressant drug we're now going to look at is cannabis or marijuana. There are reasons why we can't directly compare this drug with alcohol. And the main reason is that alcohol is described as a water-soluble drug. And for that reason it actually flushes out of our systems relatively quickly. On the contrary, cannabis is fat-soluble. It actually gets stored in the fatty tissue, accumulates there, takes some time to flush out of the fatty tissue into the bloodstream to get circulated around and finally eliminated. And whilst a person still has certain amounts of this drug pulsating in their veins, they do have some drug effect. It's also a very complex plant containing over 400 chemicals. But why do people use this drug? To become cruisy, relaxed, chilled out, spaced out. We call it stoned. And then in that space the reaction times are slowed down, they can become quite uncoordinated, and in particular it affects the brain, the short-term memory functions, thus deterring a person's ability to make accurate judgments and a person's ability to concentrate. And the two key judgments that it's pretty crucial to get spot on in any risk type industry in particular is how quickly or slowly a person reacts to a situation and their ability to measure distances accurately. This is a particular issue if a person is operating a vehicle or machinery in a confined space. It is certainly a major safety issue if a person is under the influence of this drug and they are driving, operating machinery, using tools, or doing any of the normal tasks one does in a risk category job. Then the other effects of cannabis for those people who have been long-term users is that they become increasingly demotivated and lethargic. They can even get to the stage that they just can't be bothered getting out of bed, turning up to work either on time or perhaps at all. But the worst impact is when our Kiwi kids get into their parents' or friends' stack at a young age. 9, 10, 11, 12. Some kids are regular abusers, and it's commonly used amongst teenagers. And the research that's been published over the last few years, including a major study from Otago University, clearly indicates that if kids start playing around with this drug as they're growing up or going through puberty, some of the damage that is done to the brain can never be reversed. These kids or adolescents won't have a hope in hell of reaching the full potential that they formerly had. So we now have kids who used to be gifted as youngsters, either academically, artistically, sporting-wise, dropping out mid-teens with absolutely no future focus. And by the age of mid-30s, the research shows that the IQs of those who smoked cannabis once a week or more as teenagers is worryingly lower than the non-users. And we also have a very high youth suicide rate in this country. In fact, in 2012, the research data showed that in New Zealand, per capita, we ranked the highest in the world for male youth suicides and fourth highest for female youth suicides. Now let's move to look at the effects of stimulant drugs, and we'll use P or crystal methamphetamine as our example. For P we say there are 3 phases to the cycle. The first phase is called the rush, which can last for up to 30 minutes. And this is where the user has the most incredible feeling of intense pleasure, which we call euphoria. After that euphoric hit, they stay wired or high for anything up to 12 hours. They're very wide awake, energized, hyperactive and focused. They also feel omnipotent and bulletproof, and this is inclined to entice them to do daring, risk-taking, often very stupid things that they would not consider doing if they were not under the influence of this drug. They become very confident and cocky, and often develop the talkies or the jabbers. You just can't shut them up. But they think they're experts on topics that they know absolutely nothing about, and they're inclined to talk a load of nonsense, and they're often very incessant liars. One of the side effects of P and other amphetamine type drugs is that people lose their appetite and don't eat. And so one of the first physical signs that you might notice is weight loss, but it's not like a healthy controlled diet weight loss. They become gaunt, cheeks are sallow, skin is covered in sores and eyes very aged looking. The deterioration is called wasted. The final phase is called the crash, and this can last for about the same length of time as the high. The person is now very tired and fatigued though, and they can become very angry, anxious, paranoid and even aggressive. And for a psychotic person, they could also have a very short flashpoint which can be triggered by minor events aggravating them. This combination of aggression, violence and superhuman strength makes these people pretty dangerous to be near. Now these P users absolutely hate crashing. The pleasure dome is when they're high, and they're so desperate to be back in the pleasure dome that they often tweak, meaning they take additional hits of P and can stay wired for 2 to 3 days at a time. They have to crash eventually, and because they find it difficult to sleep, they'll often take downers to sedate them, such as cannabis or sedative type drugs that they can also buy on the black market. But the use of uppers and downers is very dangerous. Physiologically, pharmacologically, psychologically, mixing and mingling is worse than taking one type of drug. And this is the face of a lady who got hooked on methamphetamine or P. Look at the deterioration over the years and how awful she looked just before she died. Post-mortem on the brain, pitted, full of holes, eats away big time at the brain cells. She virtually had no teeth. This drug dries up the saliva in your mouth. You need saliva to keep your mouth cavity in a healthy state, so gums rot, teeth decay. We call it meth mouth. A very ugly look. Sores all over the torso as well, because it highly sensitizes the nerve endings, and people often feel that they've got bugs crawling under their skin. We call it bugging, and they often scratch away at these bugs continuously and cause nasty sores and abscesses. It's a very, very debilitating drug. The final slide in this module shows the continuum which we are all part of related to the extent of use of drugs or alcohol. You may never use alcohol or drugs and therefore are a non-user. However, most New Zealand adults use alcohol, and some may use or have used in the past other recreational drugs. Users from time to time are likely to misuse. You may attend a celebratory function, a party, a wedding, Christmas festivities, or an All Black Test match, and you could well drink a few more grogs than the World Health Organization has defined as a sensible, safe amount. But this is only on occasions. And hopefully, if you're away from home, you'd have a sober driver to deliver you home, or you crash where you are. When misuse becomes a regular event, it has now progressed to abuse. The alcohol or drug has now taken control of that person's life. They are choosing this option rather than taking care of the other important aspects of their lives, such as the 4 L's in the coloured circles that we referred to earlier on in this module. Being an abuser is a dangerous zone to hover around in, because none of us know when we could trip over this fine line and fall into the alcoholic drug addiction box. And when a person is in that box, they now have a disease for the rest of their lives. A disease that says the only way forward if they want a healthy existence is abstinence from that substance forevermore. The body's mechanism to deal with that substance is broken and cannot clinically be fixed. Right up to the abuse phase, people can reduce their use by self-control and actually go back to being a user. They may need a bit of help to do this, but they actually can do that. However, once a person is an alcoholic, no amount of treatment will allow them to go back to being a user. The only real option, if they want to be healthy, that is to go back to no use at all. The question is, how do we know as individuals if we might become alcoholics or drug addicts? Because not everybody does, even with P. Not everybody turns into an addict. Well, unfortunately, we can't go off to the local diagnostic laboratory and have a few clinical tests conducted because there aren't such things. However, you can look at your genetic background. Parents, grandparents, uncles, aunties, siblings, are any of these alcoholics or drug addicts? And if the answer to that question is a big tick, then you could be a lot more at risk hovering around as an abuser than a person who hasn't come from that genetic blueprint. But this is only one clue. The problem with the new age of these dangerous designer drugs is that they weren't available in previous generations. And we know that some of them, such as P, are triggering addiction faster than any other drug that we've known in New Zealand. So it's absolutely crazy for a person to experiment with a substance when they have no idea what harmful journey it could take them on. And now relax and enjoy this video.
The wood spider is the most accomplished of all web-building species. Recently, scientists gave these tiny creatures a variety of psychoactive drugs to observe their effects on web building. When given a minute dose of LSD, the spider's web took on an unfamiliar, minimalist structure. When given caffeine, the web structure was not affected, but the spider's behavior was. Given THC, the active ingredient in marijuana, the spider didn't build a web. It built a hammock, where it lay all day and watched the caffeine spider go. When given alcohol, the spider built a web, found a mate, and raised over 100 young. But the mate got a restraining order, and now the spider can't go within 100 centimeters of the web. The crack cocaine spider figured building webs was for suckers, waited till the caffeine spider was exhausted, then came up behind it and popped a cap in its ass. Nice web, Mr. Crack Spider. When winter came, the marijuana spider had no place to live. It ended up in the crack web as the crack spider's bitch. For more information on the crack spider's bitch, contact the Canadian Wildlife Service in Ottawa.